Okay, this is David Kim and another installment of the behind the scenes footage that I shot while in Japan. And this is going to focus on Asahi Dojo. And I'm spending a little bit more time on Asahi Dojo just because it was probably one of the more interesting visits that we made there, one of the more interesting experiences that we had in Japan because of the way the class was run, the kids that we met there, and some of the observations that were made while we were watching the Tokyo Grand Slam itself. One of the comments that one of my Japanese friends mentioned while watching some of the matches is this comment like, oh, this guy doesn't know how to grip. And that sort of struck me as odd because we are at an IJF event. It's an international Grand Slam, so it's judo at the highest level. And you would think that there are plenty of Japanese judoka that were Olympic champions, world champions, or excellent at judo, formerly on the national team, etc. They moved to the US, they moved to France, they moved to Scotland, they moved to all sorts of places. And so you would think that expertise would go with them. Even if you choose not to adopt the Japanese style of gripping and entering, you would think there would still be an understanding of that. Coaches aren't stupid. I'm sure they can see it. Even myself watching some of these matches, you could see the Japanese player kind of dominating the inside position, dominating the grips, and given that dominance being much more offensive than their opponent. I'm sure, I have absolutely no doubt, it's painfully obvious to coaches. And so with that in mind, Asahi Dojo was very interesting. On the surface, it was very interesting because it was one long training session with short breaks to let kids leave the mat and let kids get on the mat. And even coming on the mat was very quick. Getting off the mat, especially for the younger kids, the instructor would have them all line up and I'm sure give them some kind of exhortation and they would all agree with him in a very assertive way and then just run off the mat, which is very cute and I guess for their self-confidence and that sort of thing. But there was not that much instruction. It was mostly games. And when I say games, I'm not talking about eco games, just actual games like, hey, you got to sprint back and forth and the team that wins the game, or you have to dive through people's legs and do another race and then that team wins or loses. They had other exercises where you would have to start on your belly or back and get up without using your hands. All of these things that are sort of helping you with your body awareness and using parts of your body to do things that you wouldn't normally do just walking around in normal life. So those are some of the games, particularly at the younger levels. And beyond that, it almost seemed like active breaks, right? The rest of it was just drilling throws. It was actual randori or actual newaza randori. There was not a lot of just sitting around and watching someone show you a technique. Which is very much a jiu-jitsu thing. These were young kids, probably in elementary school. And so they were moving the entire time. And they would repeat this kind of cycle of drilling, of sparring, of game. There would be a little bit of correction here and there from the instructor or one of the assistant instructors, but no classroom style teaching. The only instruction we got was with the oldest kids, and I'm not sure if that was because that's what they normally do or because we were guests there and they did it for our benefit and not for the middle schoolers. The other thing I noticed is that there was a huge difference between the younger kids and the older kids. The younger kids, and this may have to do with the Japanese system from what I understand, because the younger kids, they're kind of doing it for fun. They could put techniques together, but somewhere between 10 and 14, something changes because those 14-year-olds, at least from a gripping perspective and just, body mechanic perspective, were light years beyond the 10-year-olds. And a lot of things happen between 10 and 14, right? You're growing a lot and mentally you're growing, all that kind of stuff. But it was much more sophisticated, and the guys in our group, I think it really drove home the importance of getting dominant grips because many of them could not achieve those grips. So even if they didn't get thrown, they definitely could intuitively feel that they were being dominated by a middle schooler. I think it makes it very obvious, and I think it put into context their previous day's experience at Keio University, because everyone was getting out-gripped, regardless of the weight class difference between your potential partner, the fact that it was happening even at the 14-year-old level was a wake-up call for a lot of the guys on the trip. And not all the guys on the trip are highly experienced judo athletes. That's actually not the case. But, even for the guys that were more experienced, I think they were surprised at the ability of these kids to dominate that grip fight and how much it mattered, right? How much it really either stopped them from doing what they wanted or allowing these young kids to throw. And so one of the things that comes out of this, it begs the question, why is it that the Japanese develop these skills and other parts of the world haven't? It's a big question in my mind because, like I said earlier, Japanese athletes teach everywhere in the world. I think the gap between Japanese judo and the rest of the world has definitely decreased. The lead that the Japanese had 50 years ago was much greater than it is now. But still, I think if you ask people, there is an edge that the Japanese still have versus other nations when it comes to judo, particularly at the lighter weights. And we know this to be true because, judoka from around the world still want to go to Japan to train. They want to get that feel, that mat feel, because they're not going there for someone to show them how to do Uchimata. I mean, at least in my opinion, or from what I can tell, they're going there to train. They're going there to get that intuition, get that nuance, and improve their game. So this is something that's been bothering me for the last few weeks. When you look at the kids at Asahi Dojo and the actual drills they do, right, starting back to back and then having to scramble up and get to dominant position, the games and the drills, it's all known. There was no magic. I guess the only thing that might be different, particularly from American eyes, is that they were very young kids, a lot of them. And I also know once you hit middle school, that's when things start getting serious and the training volume really increases. And so some people make the osmosis argument, like there's a culture of judo there. People learn by mimicry, copying their seniors to some extent, and then making adjustments to make it their own. The environment is deep enough that they learn this intuitively. It's not explicitly taught. It is inferred by the athletes, and the ones that survive the judo program to get to the international level. In some ways, you could say it is eco in the sense that they've evolved, they've survived. The other people have been eliminated, and you're only seeing the people that were able to make the adjustments and evolve as they moved up in skill. But still, something doesn't sit right with me. Our ability as humans is to create an abstraction that is useful, do the analytics, do the diagnostics, and reverse engineer the key points. And I'm sure coaches are doing that, and yet there is a gap in knowledge. So if anybody has a good idea about that, please let me know.